Next question. If you could, would you want to learn about New Zealand's railways? I would like to learn about New Zealand's railways, and I would like to visit them one day. For the most part, I've only taken train trips in the United States and the United Kingdom. It'd be interesting to ride a railway from another country other than America and Britain. For now, I'm stuck in the USA, but I do plan to get a DVD about New Zealand's railways. I don't know if you know this, but there's this great television program called Great Scenic Railway Journeys, a program that started in 1992 with a special documentary of the Great Smoky Mountains Railway. This Emmy Award series is a must-see for railway fans. I've gained quite a collection of these programs on VHS in their original packaging. But there's a lot more programs on DVD now, ranging from train trips across America, tours of historic steam railways, the best of scenic railways of the eastern and western United States, and tributaries of railways that have paved way through America's diverse terrains. They also have documentaries on the Great Smoky Mountains Railway, which gained a sequel in 2012, the Western Maryland Scenic Railway, the Cass Scenic Railway, the Texas State Railroad, the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railway, and the Potomac Eagle River Railroad, which you can only get on VHS, and if you're lucky enough to find it on eBay or Amazon. They've also traveled over the Pacific Ocean to film the railways of Oceania, in the countries of Australia and New Zealand. The documentary of New Zealand looks great on its website promo, and I aim to get it soon. Only thing I wish for Great Scenic Railways Journeys to do is to go over the Atlantic Ocean and show the railways that the UK have to offer, no matter what the weather. Next and last question. 1702 or a loco from overseas? 1702. This is one of the first steam engines I've known in my life, and as such is a favorite of mine. I'm also familiar with it more than any other S-160 that have been sent overseas. Speaking of 1702, just this Christmas I got a CD album called Steel Rails Under Thundering Skies, which is a collection of recordings of trains working on rainy days. 1702 is on the album, and she has her classic 6-chime whistle. Why do I bring this up? Well, remember the question in the first Q&A video about what my favorite whistle was and my explanations on the 1702's first GSMR whistle? Well, this recording was made during the time when 1702 still worked on the Reader Railroad, which indicates that she actually acquired that whistle long before she started work on the GSMR. So, my theory that she used that whistle only during early GSMR days proves incorrect, as she got the whistle on the Reader Railroad and carried it on to the Fremont and Elkhorn Railway and then on to the GSMR. What I am correct about, though, is that the whistle still isn't a cotton belt whistle, as the sources for the cotton belt whistle information still date back to the early 1960s, while this recording of her with my favorite whistle was made during the 1970s. And 1702, in This Property is Condemned, is clearly using a cotton belt whistle, as the film was made in 1964. The final verdict is that it's unlikely if any retired hostler of the GSMR would know the origins of the whistle if 1702 used it before they worked on her. However, if anyone has any article on the Reader Railroad or its engines in any magazine that date back to the 1970s or possible late 1960s, let me know. Next YouTuber is Nicholas Montagnino, and his first question is, what would you think if someone made a Thomas & Friends and Pokemon crossover? Some people might say that this would be a cool idea, but if I were looking for a crossover series, I'd look for a different show that actually has a relation with the original series, because it calls for better storylines. For instance, if I were making a crossover series in which the first party involved Thomas, I would look for The Little Engine That Could or Starlight Express to fill in the second party. Or in some cases, the crossover involving Thomas and Tugs, or Tugs and Theodore Tugboat. Or if I wanted to, since my Magic Red Adventure series takes place in a different dimension, I could make a crossover of the MRA and the Twilight Zone. But you all know I'm not gonna dive into the Twilight Railroad adventures. In my opinion, a crossover series of two shows that have a relation with each other somewhat calls for stronger storylines and a lot more episodes. I personally can't see much of a connection between talking trains and pocket monsters. I mean, what can a train do with a Pokemon? The trains don't even have hands! But it's not just the physics, there's also the storyline. To compare, Thomas and Friends has a variety of plot lines that could logically happen on a railway. Well, the Audrey stories anyway. On the other hand, the basic plot of Pokemon is about a kid and at least one or two companions going around collecting hybrid animals only to use them in combat with a team of generic bad guys who are following them, trying to steal their monsters. That's what happens every episode anyways! The point I'm trying to make is that if you were to make a Thomas Pokemon crossover, it wouldn't use much Thomas elements. It would just be the same generic Pokemon plot, only with the Thomas characters added into the mix. I mean, imagine this. Ash and whatever team he's with at the moment decide to call upon Thomas and his friends to help them with finding Pokemon and using them in battle. And towards the end, he regrets it. Why? Because the trains are all chuffing useless, that's why! Audrey knows they'd be of no help in a fight, let alone manage a pocket monster. I've seen fans complain about Thomas not being involved a lot in Thomas and the Magic Railroad, but as a train, there's very limited things he can do, and he has some purpose to be in the film. He helps get Lily back to Muffle Mountain when there was no other fast way to get her back, and he also collects the coal truck from the Magic Railroad, and he does protect Lady from Diesel 10 by getting in between the two. He's practically sacrificing himself during the chase. That takes a lot of courage and heroism for a kid to pull off a stunt like that. But in the situation of Pokemon, there's practically little he can do to help Ash and his group. He'd be as useless to Ash and the Pokemon as a pile of scrap wood. Maybe I'm not thinking outside the box, but when it comes to creating a story, I like to be as realistic as possible. Plus, I'm not so keen on Thomas being animated. Next question. What do I think of Wild Nor'Wester's series, Sodor the early years and Sodor the modern years? I can't really give much of an answer to that, as I've only recently watched only 2 episodes from the show, both of them involving Lily the Wellsworth and Sudbury engine. I'll have to watch more episodes in order to give a better opinion of it. What I can say about it is that at least the stories I have seen does give good plots and realistic settings. Much better than Thomas and Friends Season 15 and 16. Next question. Have I ever watched Enterprising Engines 93's videos? Of course I have. I wouldn't be subscribed to his channel if I didn't. I also wouldn't have been able to mention him in the past questions I've answered. I also got casted as the voice of Salty in his show. However, if you're looking for an opinion of a show before watching it and just want to be cautious before treading into foreign waters, I can safely say that his stories have brilliant writings and the visuals are excellent. Next question. What do I think of the untold story of Timothy? I didn't know there was one. Oh well, let's see what secrets that little oil-burning China Clay Works engine has hidden from us.
1 hour later.
So, apparently this has nothing to do with the little oil-burning China Clay Works engine. In actuality, this is a creepypasta fiction describing the prologue of the Ghost Train. And I put quotations on prologue. There's not too much information that I could find that describes the original plot, as the original source has been removed from the internet, and what evidence I could find is a bunch of YouTubers' personal take-ons of the story. But it's enough to give me a sense of the storyline. It describes the deleted prologue from the Thomas and Friends Season 2 episode, Ghost Train, about an engine that worked on the railway before it became the Northwestern Railway. This engine was painted grey, had 6 small wheels, a number 0 on its tanks, and the name Timothy. He was to take a nighttime passenger train out, but at a station stop, his crew lost control, and Timothy kept rolling along until he plunged off the track where the viaduct now stands. Now, I have no idea what happens at this point. I don't know if Timothy was a demon train this whole time, or if he got possessed by a demon, or if he allowed himself to become a demon at the end. It doesn't give a clear message. What I do know is that this story doesn't end here. It's described to have aired on TV with the rest of the episode. However, enraged fans and the Reverend Audrey were appalled by it and demanded it to be removed. But of course, that's just a piece of fictional rubbish, and a fraudulent one made at that. Fraudulent, you ask? Well, let me give you the evidence. First off, in the days of Season 1 and 2, Brit Allcroft and David Mitton were adapting stories that were written specifically by the Reverend Audrey and Christopher Audrey. There was a policy back then that whatever stories were put into TV had to be printed into book form first. This included the Railway series and created the Railway series television series tie-in books like Thomas's Christmas Party, Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree, etc., and even a story from the annuals. Clearly, there was no evidence that Brit and Dave asked for a ghost story describing the prequel of Ghost Train, especially when they're already doing such a spooky story enough a spooky enough story as it is. Secondly, why would both the Audreys and Allcroft and Mitton even consider the storyline if it was such a dark plot? They would know for certain that if this story ever got out into the public under their own names, Thomas the Tank Engine would have been dropped altogether. All books would have been burned, all the toys would have been thrown away, and all the tapes destroyed. And to add to that, if it were in the case of Allcroft's title, then Reverend Audrey would, along with hundreds of viewers, demand the show be removed from television altogether. Then we wouldn't even have a Season 3 onward series. Thirdly, if Reverend Audrey put spiritual elements such as angels and demons into his books, then the Railway series would be an entirely different story. As a side note, in the original Ghost Train story, the Ghost Train was meant to act as a warning to others. Since that's the first story that's been firmly rooted, then this creepypasta is not one to go after. So, before I give my opinion, let me just say that I like Halloween stories of ghost trains, but I'm not really fond of creepypastas. They're just too dark to my liking, and mainly consist of certain characters in question either being really gruesome or being really evil. Stories of ghost trains, on the other hand, involve trains that relate to some form of death, whether it be carrying a dead person or getting invoked in a serious accident and returning in spirit form to haunt the tracks or act as a warning to others. If Timothy wanted to wreck himself, then there'd be no point of him acting as a warning to others in spirit. I just don't see how that works. The only reason why he would want to return as a spirit would be to either wreck another train or scare the scrap out of them. So my opinion is this, and you probably know the answer. I think that this is a poor excuse of a ghost train story that I have ever come across. It wasn't conceived well, and it lacks for realism and logic and actual reason to be frightened. This is like Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining. It just doesn't work! Sorry, but next time someone tries to write a creepypasta based on Thomas and Friends, try something better than this. In fact, it would be better if no one else attempts a creepypasta. Okay, the next YouTuber is PC Praps, and his first question is, what would you think of a story about Thomas and the other engines going to America? Well, this is an interesting idea. It would be neat to see the engines go on a trip to the USA. After all, Flying Scotsman, Duchess of Hamilton, and some other engines went to the USA, so why not? Of course, Sir Tom Hat would have to make sure that he has enough dough to fulfill the payments. He'd also have to make sure that he doesn't choose too many engines to send to America. The number of engines should at least include Thomas and Gordon. Next question. How about a Thomas episode or special that focuses on American steam excursion locomotives? Well, it depends on how many episodes or how long the special is going to focus on a specific location. I doubt it if there's going to be an episode or a special dedicated to one American steam excursion engine. I mean, there are a lot of them. 844, 3985, 4449, 765, 3751, to name a few. Though it would be nice for the engines to meet the steam excursion engines. Maybe if there's a rail fair that the submarine engines can attend. That way they made a number of excursion engines. I think that the submarine engines might get along with 844 since none of them technically retired from active service. There could also be a subplot in which Thomas or some other engine fight with someone else over the attention of 4449. Well, let's face it, the Daylight's the most beautiful steam engine in the world. And apparently she's very sexy to some people. I know people do very weird things. I've seen people do a lot of strange stuff, yada yada yada, bada beam bada boom, been there, done that, bang bang, etc. Now, I'm not saying that I have anything against people who dreams up of whatever they want and put it in a fanfic. Oftentimes I imagine my favorite friend as a Daylight engine. But there are some things that are a little too strange for my liking. For one thing, there are these tin signs that are an actual product sold in official railway catalogs and websites. Now, I'd expect to find this stuff on DeviantArt, but this is just over the top. I thought nothing would top Electra the electric engine, but this is over the top. Next question. What are the videos/DVDs you use for your footage of real locomotives like Grand Canyon 29, CNO 2765, etc.? I have so many, and not all of them are in the same series. I have at least 3 main series of videos that I use. One of them being in the Great Scenic Railway Journeys line. The creator of the GSRJ, Robert C. Van Camp, is a brilliant man. He's filmed the majority of this show all by himself, and the visuals are absolutely stunning. Take his program of Thunder in the Alleghenies, the story of the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad. He hiked all the way to the top of the mountains surrounding the Narrows, and filmed the train far below in the gorge, on the edge of the rickety precipice. The very edge. I mean, you go beyond the limits of any other rail filmographer. The second series is from Skyfire Video Collection. You can see where I got the footage of 2765 here. Whereas Robert C. Van Camp can film the most majestic pictures of scenic landscapes as well as the train, Jim Mitchell can film up close to the locomotive, and you can get a sense of the size of the locomotives. My favorite program in particular is Steaming Up the New River Gorge. It takes an otherwise common annual excursion and turns it into a fascinating story. Apart from the trip, there is also an interesting prologue describing the creation of coal and the history of New River, a journey through the wondrous land of West Virginia, and special bluegrass music provided by Jim Costa and partner.
I'm just as fond of beauty as any man can be. Those rosy cheeks and pearly teeth I dearly love to see. I know one that has them, and she's a beauty too. Oh, she is the sweetest girlie, and she's got the money too. Now won't I love my honey, Lord, yes. And won't I spend her money, ain't it a sin? I'm as happy as a flower that sips the falling dew. Cause I got a brand new girlie, and she's got the money too.
The third series is from Pentrax. Here's where the term less is more is applied. While the videos are narrated, there is no music whatsoever, and this gives a great collection of railway sound effects. Now for standalone videos. As well as Pentrax, there are other videos where I can get great footage of the Grand Canyon Railway. Take this one for example. Look familiar? It should. That's right. This is the video used for the Shining Time Christmas special. There are also videos which were especially produced by Grand Canyon Railway, Steam Train to the Canyon, and 100 Years to the Canyon. But the quality of the latter is nearly faded, so I can't really use it much. All other footage of the Grand Canyon Railway comes from Thunder Under Heaven, a 2-part DVD set that gives a detailed look into the GCR. Thunder from the Wild West tells the history of the GCR, as well as the locomotives, stations, and shop facilities. Thunder in the Canyon shows the 24-hour work time that the GCR goes about every day of the year. 4960 is the star of this program, and the glimpse into the life of the railway is very interesting. The last video I have is a personal favorite, and that's the souvenir video of the Great Smoky Mountains Railway. Honestly, I have no idea how I got a hold of this video. It was one of the very first train videos that I got, and I remember seeing it as far back as the time when I was a bouncing baby boy. I could have gotten it during a vacation to the Grand Canyon Railway, as that was the first tourist railway that I ever went to, but since this is a souvenir video of the GSMR, it's more likely that it was purchased during a trip to North Carolina when I was an infant. Possibly in a video store. I certainly know that my family and I didn't go to the GSMR. We would have had photos of the trains if we did. Mysteries aside, this is a favorite of mine, since everything about this video is perfect. It was filmed during the golden days of the GSMR, the color tone is excellent, and there is very nice music used, which I only found recently that it was supplemented by the Old George production music studio. The website still exists, and while the music is very costly, you do have the privilege to hear free samples. It's a pity it's not a royalty-free music website, because this music would have been perfect for the MRA. Next question. Are there any specific American locomotives you're going to use in the MRA, besides 1702 of course? Well, mainly it depends on the models that are available. I was thinking about having GCR 18 appear in a Christmas episode, but there are no models of any of the LS&I locomotives produced. Literally, I've searched the internet for 280 consolidations, and I haven't found anything that closely resembles GCR 18. All I have to go by is video footage of GCR 18 chugging through the winter snow, and I don't really want to go through all the trouble of kit bashing an engine for appearances, because, well, everyone's waiting for me to get on with the MRA! Chillax, people. I'll get back to it as soon as I finish other obligations. Other engines I'm thinking about is 4960, 722, 425, Sierra Railway No. 3, 611, GCR 29, and 2765. Each one of them might have at least an appearance in one episode. I know it's important to feature a 611 as it does have strong connections with a certain Shining Time station character. Fortunately, Bachmann Trains makes a great model in its spectrum range, so I think it's worth seeking out. Bachmann Trains also supply a canal for a 284 engine and 280 consolidation, so I'm not too worried about 2765 and 722. However, I think the Overland's model kit of 722 is a more accurate locomotive in my opinion. Tyco Mantua is well known for making 460 and Rogers engines, so I'm not bothered about number 3 as long as the models on eBay are decent quality, if not great. 4960, 425, and 29 are more of a challenge, though, since they've only been made in brass kit form, and thus are hard to find. Now, I did say that none of the LS&I locomotives have been produced in model form. However, the 280 from Broadway Limited's imports has the closest resemblance to the 29 that I've seen. There is a kit model of the GM&O G1 class in existence made by Sunset Models. However, the 462 Pacific engine from Broadway Limited Imports also has a close resemblance to the 425, and it's more readily available model currently. 4960 is harder to find because the only HO scale engine that is modeled on the 01A mic is the brass kit made by Oriental Limited, which I think has become hard to find nowadays. Problem is that I haven't found any other HO scale Mikado that bears a close resemblance to the 4960. Of course, you can't really do without the 844 and the 475, can you? Thankfully, I have a model of the 8444, and there is a brass kit model of the N and WM class existing, so I might be able to have a chance of having the 475. However, it's also made by Sunset Models and is also hard to find. I'm also thinking of adding some GPs to the range as well as an FPA4. Don't worry, the GPs will only be on maintenance of way, banker and freight duties. The IVR won't be fully dieselized. Great Smoky Mountain Railway has been known to use several GP units, and they are the most common diesel engine used, so finding a model of them won't be too difficult. Bachmann Trains makes GP7s and GP9s with high hoods, so they'll be perfect for number 200 and 1551. They also make some GP35s, and with the additions of high hoods from Cannon and Company, they'll be perfect for 210 and 223. Rapido Trains recently released some FPA4 models, so finding a model for the GCR's FP4 diesels will be a piece of cake. Next question. What are your thoughts on the American locomotives already introduced in the TV series? I'm guessing you know that answer in a previous question answered earlier. I'm not going to bother repeating answers from this point on. Okay, that was the last one, and the next one is by Richard the Blue Hunsled Engine, and his first question is, have you ever heard of Five Nights at Freddy's, and what are my thoughts on it? I'm starting to notice a strange pattern in the questions that are coming up, because they all seem to pop up whenever I'm watching a video in relation to the question. I was just watching Game Theory's Five Nights at Freddy's 2 video when this question came up. Coincidence? I think not. I don't believe in coincidence. But I digress. By now you'll know that yes, indeed, I have heard of it. As a matter of fact, when the first YouTube videos came out of Five Nights at Freddy's, and I saw the video icon screen, I thought it was going to be a horror mockery of Star Fox. I mean, the bunny looks a lot like Peppy Hare, and the rabbit is like the most advertised character out of all of them. How was I supposed to know? Eventually, I found out what the story of Five Nights at Freddy's is, and my thoughts on it is that this is a really silly game. Now, don't get me wrong, Five Nights at Freddy's is a very scary game. And I will say that it's not as messed up as the untold story of Timothy. But the fact is that the fear in the game makes players lose the sense of logic in the story. Let me explain. For one example, the audio animatronics are programmed to move about at night because of the fear of their servos locking up. How is that even possible? Have you ever heard of one Disney Imagineer or one Chuck E. Cheese employee say that they've had to lead the robots on for the night just to avoid their servos locking up? That's more of a waste of power than having the doors closed. In fact, why is it that to close doors uses up power? I would think that the amount of power used up with the use of doors would be just activating them, and that's it. Keeping them closed wouldn't really use up any power. It wouldn't make any difference from keeping them open. Admittedly, I don't fully understand hydraulic systems and all that, but I'm pretty sure that this isn't logical. Another thing I'd like to point out is the fact that the audio animatronics recognizes you as a endoskeleton? Okay, this part is really silly. There's a huge difference between a human being and an endoskeleton. A human being has a variety of shapes in their form, has a lot of color and no shine to them, and moves about smoothly. An endoskeleton uses about one basic shape in its parts, mainly a series of long, thin, rectangular limbs, as one primary color cylinder is very metallic and thus very shiny, and it moves about in a jerky sort of way. I'm pretty sure that after performing in front of an audience of human beings for about how many years, the animal sensors would recognize the difference between a person and a robot. And while we're on the subject, how is it that the audio animatronics are able to walk around and move off their station without losing power? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that audio animatronics at the time, 1980s, 1990s, I don't care, would be more restricted to their stages. I mean, what are these? Battery powered? Surely they must have some wires or cables that have to be connected to a main computer or power source underneath the stage. The only mobile audio animatronic that has this advanced technology that I can think of is Lucky the Dinosaur, and she didn't come around until 2003. Yet these 1980s animals can go on free roaming without any problems. Now, if all of the facts that I have just stated up to this point were true with any real-life animatronic, then the Kingdom Keepers would be an entirely different story. Now, I know that the robots in the first game are supposedly possessed, and I can understand their motive of attacking the player better in that aspect. But in the second game, the new robots aren't possessed. However, they make up for this by having a criminal recognition database programmed into their system, which I guess explains the reason why the new robots attack the player. If the security guard the player is portraying as is actually the criminal. But in all honesty, the robots possessed is much more scarier. Let's just hope none of Will Peter Blady's works get involved in the process of any future Five Nights games. Otherwise, we'd get possessed robots and possessed girls roaming about on security cameras. Ugh, I don't even want to think about it. Curse you, Peter Blady! Next question. How did I give my Hornby Thomas a straight footplate? Well, the existing running board was filed down to the same thickness as the side tanks. Then the splashers were cut off and replaced with those from the Bachmann Edward. Plasticard was then used to extend the tanks down even further. These were later painted blue, and a second layer of plasticard was glued on to make the running board, aligning them with the new splashers to the front and rear buffer beams. Next question. Will I do model train reviews? I don't really have much of an intention to do so. For one thing, I'm still pretty much in the early stages of creating a model railway collection. I feel like I don't have enough models to make a good enough series of reviews. For another thing, as I'm making my collection, I go to other reviews of locomotives that I want to get, and then get the one that seems the best. And if I can't do that, then I try to get the next best thing. What I'm looking for in terms of model engines are ready-to-run, accurate, detailed, and realistic model trains. However, the models I'm looking for are very costly, and a good number of the accurate, detailed, and realistic model trains you can't get ready-to-run. They're made in kit form. It's the reason why I got the Bachmann and Hornby Thomas trains. I didn't want them intentionally, but I had to get them because, well, they're the best I could afford to get at the moment. Why can't we live in a time when a cup of tea only costs a dime and model train kits are priced at $70? Next question. Which model trains are your favorite and why? Well, the Hornby T9 comes off the top of my head. It's the very first model that I got that I intentionally wanted for the Railway Series engines, and it's a very good model. True, it's not precisely the basis for Edward, but at least it resembles him the most. The American Freedom Train is my second favorite engine. Now, some of you are probably asking, if the Daylight reminds me of the girl that I liked, why did I get the American Freedom Train version? Well, I actually got the AFT version before I started developing the MRA, back in a time when I was in a patriotic mode and wanted to create a series about the American Freedom Train, with the trains being able to talk. However, as you can guess, I only got as far as getting one engine, and nothing else really made much development. Before I get to the next set of questions, let me just clear this up. Whilst I consider the Hornby Thomas to be my favorite Thomas merchandise, I don't really consider it as a favorite model engine. The reason is because, like the other Bachman-Thomas models that I have, the Hornby-Thomas model isn't the one I wanted intentionally to use for Thomas. Despite it using the tooling from the Hornby E2, it's still very basic in terms of realism. Unfortunately, Hornby has not made the E2 with extended side tanks, and the only other models of a realistic E2 model with extended side tanks are kits made by Will's South Finecast and Ace Products. Okay, the next YouTuber is Mike D57S, and his first question is, what other things do I like besides Thomas? Well, as I live in America, I do enjoy the Kingdom Keepers book series by Ridley Pearson. In fact, I put this book series in my top favorite book series next to the Railway series. It's a stellar series. In fact, I can read through any new book in a matter of hours. It's such a page-turner. For those of you who are hearing about this series for the first time, I won't spoil the plot. Go ahead and buy the books. What I do regret is the fact that no movie adaptation has been made of these books. So, if you like the Kingdom Keepers, spread the word and let the Disney company know that we fans want a movie adaptation. Oh no. What have I done? What have I done? I've let the whole world know that I'm a Kingdom Keepers reader! Now somebody's going to refer to the IBC! I'm doomed!
Do me a favor, guys, and let's keep this hush-hush, okay? I don't want to have to go through the IBC, if you know what I mean.
When I fly home from school and have nothing to do, I like to hang out with Winnie the Pooh. I don't mean the Disney version, I mean the original A.A. Milne stories. This, I feel, is something as enjoyable as Thomas, as both series were inspired by toys of the children of their respective authors. Thomas being based on a little wooden toy train for Christopher Audrey, and Pooh being based on a teddy bear of Christopher Robin. Heck, there's another connection for you! Both of their kids were named Christopher! I also like Jerry Anderson's series. This series is very ingenious with its use of marionettes and models. I have the entire box collection of the Thunderbirds series, as well as the 2 Thunderbirds movies and Captain Scarlet series. I'm very excited about the new projects Jerry's son Jamie are going to bring to life, such as Gemini Force 1 and Firestorm. I'm also excited about the new Thunderbirds series that will be airing very soon. In fact, while we're on the subject, to those of you who pushed out production of Mad Bomber Episode 2, David Mitton worked on these series as well as Thomas the Tank Engine, and yet so many fans are so iffy about Thomas the Tank Engine being inside Thunderbird 2. What's your problem? If David Mitton can work on both Thunderbirds and Thomas, then surely a fan-made story can use these 2 elements. I bet you people who don't know a thing about Thomas the Tank Engine and Thunderbirds. Something else that I like is another story from Christopher Audrey, and those are the Lady of the Isles books. This is a rare attempt to tie in the railway with the mythologies of the Hebrides Islands. It's only touched upon lightly, but I feel it's a good attempt. We see the flagship of the now defunct Island of Mull Railway, Lady of the Isles, or as she's known for short, Lottie, wondering about the origins of her name. She one night travels on a railway through an enchanted forest where she meets the spirit of the Lady of the Isles. Now, you might think that's not much, but if you dive in a little deeper, you can find that in the mythologies of the Hebrides, there was actually a Lady of the Isles, who was the wife of the Lord of the Isles, who ruled over the Hebrides, which back then was known as the Kingdom of the Isles. And if you dive in further, you'll find, believe it or not, Sodor is a part of that mythology too. It's a shame that Christopher Audrey didn't write any more books in this series, because it would have called for some really great stories and a lot more explanations of the mythological elements that the railway tie in with. In fact, this is something that a lot of writers should use, connecting the railway with the mythologies of the country they run in. The only 2 series I can think of that use this element are the Lady of the Isles books and Shining Time Station. Both of these series touch upon the mythological aspect lightly, but despite that, it's still very interesting. In Shining Time Station, we have Billy Two Feathers, a Native American engineer who knows a lot about the Indian Valley Railway and the land it travels through. There are a number of episodes that have him telling the kids and Stacy either something about the railway or of his native heritage. This is carried through to Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Well, the original script anyways. In the original version, we see the Shining Time gang have a deep understanding about the valley and the spirit of the land. That's strongly carried by the spirit of Russell Means. Being a Native American himself, he had an understanding about what Brit Allcroft wanted to tell to the audience, and he knew that Thomas and the Magic Railroad goes in depth into the spirit of the land and the understanding of the valley very much like any other Native American would. It's because of this that he wanted the director's cut to be shown to the audience, and he was one of the pioneers to set up the first petition to bring the director's cut to life. Now Russell Means has joined his ancestors in the next dimension, but fans of Thomas, Shining Time, and the Magic Road, you can keep his spirit alive. Let the world know of the director's cut of Thomas and the Magic Railroad, and let them know that Russell Means wanted the world to see this version of the film. Keep his spirit alive in memory of him. I'm getting a little emotional here, and I'm kind of dabbling much, so here's a list of other things that I like other than Thomas.
The wind in the willows sang softly to me. Follow my voice.
Postman Pat, Postman Pat, Postman Pat, and his black and white cat.
She's fantastic. Wherever there is danger, he'll be there.
That's all I can think of off the top of my head. Next question. What are a few of the fan-made Thomas series you like? Now, you can refer to the answer I posted for Thomas and Ensigns 1. Next question. What is my opinion on Tugs and Theodore Tugboat? These are two rarities that I thoroughly enjoy. Okay, so Theodore Tugboat ran for longer than Tugs did, but you still can't find the full series on DVD. I remember watching Theodore Tugboat in my childhood when it aired on PBS and Channel 13. Cool, those were the days. I really liked the calm pace of the stories and the dilemmas that the characters were going through. I also liked the narration provided by Denny Doherty, who played the Harbor Master in the intro and outro of every episode, similar to Shining Time Station, with Mr. Conductor. In fact, a lot of television series at that time were in that format, a live-action intro and outro wrapping around the stories in the model world which held the center. Shining Time Station, Theodore Tugboat, Noddy in the Toy Shop, Salty's Lighthouse. Okay, Salty's Lighthouse had animated wraparound segments, but it still had that similar format of a story within a story. Tugs I could only watch in the UK when I went to visit my dad's family over summer breaks. The most prominent one I remember watching was High Tide. It's a favorite of mine because it involved trains. What I regret about Tugs is that it never aired in the USA as its own format. I didn't watch Salty's Lighthouse when it aired, largely because I never knew about it. And when I did find out about it and watched some episodes on YouTube, boy, was I glad I didn't watch it. The animated segments are all cheesy, the episode reuses the same footage over and over again, several of the original Tugs characters were changed, and almost all of them had the same voice actors as those you would find in Super Mario Bros. Next question. Are there any original ideas by Brit and David that you particularly enjoyed? You mean the original stories that they wrote for Thomas and Friends, or original stories they wanted to make? I can tell you that I've seen the episode 5 series, and while some episodes were similar to the style of the Audrey stories, others seemed like rip-offs of famous motion pictures. As for original series, I can't really say much about them since I don't really know them that well. I know that David Mitton had wanted to work on the adventures of Orson Island, but since that never really took off, I can't really say that I have much interest in that. The only other show I know of Brit Allcroft to have worked on is The Adventures of Mumpy, and that wasn't really an original idea, it was just based on some book series or something. I never watched the show because, well, I didn't know about it during my childhood. The show aired on the Fox channel, and I never really watched Fox channel in my childhood. I watched shows on PBS and WB Kids. However, it would be interesting to see what Mumpy is like, as it is a different path that Brit Allcroft took than Thomas the Tank Engine. What doesn't make sense to me is the reaction Mumpy fans have of Brit Allcroft purchasing the Mumpy rights from Mid Entertainment. I don't know if this is meant to be a joke or something, but come on, Mumpy fans, are you serious? Brit Allcroft is the one that brought the show to life, and you're putting her off for taking ownership of Mumpy again? Guys, Hit Entertainment is the one that ruined Thomas with seasons 8 to 16. Would you rather have Hit ruin Mumpy like they did to Thomas? Also, Brit Allcroft's doing you guys a favor by putting Mumpy onto DVD. You should be thankful. Okay, the next YouTuber is Thomas and Lionel, Fan-Making Productions, and his first question is, how do I feel about the 70th anniversary of Thomas and the Railway series in 2015? And what do I think about the NW Wooden Railway Thomas? I'm very excited about the anniversary. This is the one anniversary I've seen in my time in which it pays tribute to the original Railway series. But of course, I'm still young yet. I can't wait to see the 100th anniversary. As for the wooden railway model of the original toy version of Thomas, I'm very delighted that the seeds of Thomas are being recognized. I might go out and buy that little model. Of course, it'll be the last wooden railway model I'll buy, as I've moved on to HO00 scale model railroading. Next question. Have I or have I not seen the Lego Movie? If I did, what are my thoughts on it? Yes, I have seen it, and I think it's a very creative movie. I've seen official films made by LEGO where everything uses CGI, but in this one, the detail is so precise that it's hard to think that it was all done with CGI. My favorite character is Good Cop, Bad Cop. He's a very funny character, and Liam Neeson performs him perfectly. Next question is, what are my thoughts and judgments on Proteus the Magic Engine, and will he or will he not appear in the Magic Red Adventures The Legend series as a secondary magic engine to help Our Lady and protect the Magic Railroad? Okay. Proteus. When he first appeared, I was kind of intrigued by the concept, as the magic lamp obviously stems from the 1001 Arabian Nights, and I have a sort of fascination in the culture of that those stories originate from. Arabia. I mean, the music's mystifying, the designs of the creative products like carpets, tiles, and lamps are exotic, and the princesses and belly dancers... Getting back on track, I was, however, expecting Proteus to be a one-off character with not much potential to be in any more stories. I also assumed that, as he only appeared in a story told by Scolari, he would just be an old railway mythology told only by imaginative engines. As a result, I was taken by surprise when Proteus made a return in the episode Mountain Marvel. Seems like he was more than a myth. I wasn't expecting a statue of him to appear. And now we have wooden and Trackmaster models of him. My favorite appearance of him is not in any of those episodes, however. It's in Enterprising Engine's 93 story, Swashbuckler. The way his story is explained in that episode is brilliant. It ties up some loose ends and gives viewers a clear picture of his history. And while I do like that element very much, I'm also very jealous, because had I thought of that concept beforehand, I would have used it in the MRA. Oh well, back to the drawing board. Speaking of the MRA, I wasn't planning on having Proteus appear in the MRA The Legend. However, now that you mention it, it's quite possible that he might make an appearance in, or mention in the Battle series. Probably the characters can search for his long-lost magic lamp. Well then, how many other fan stories of Proteus have that? Next question. You're not going to watch Tin Synth... correct me if I'm wrong. Upcoming sequel in future, Tobias and the Arcane Merchants, are you? Since you've gave some point involving your judgments on the Half-Pariah film? Well, I might watch it to see if it holds up any better than the first film, but I don't have high hopes, seeing how I wasn't impressed with the Half-Pariah film. Next question. If the Billington E2 locomotives weren't scrapped, and if you had permission by Hidden Entertainment, would you recreate Thomas and the Magic Railroad with its director's cut into a more realistic and more railway series feeling of how it should have been than how it originally went towards everyone else in 2000? And by realistic, I mean with real locomotives other than just former NNW 475 of the Strasbourg Railway being the only real train. Okay, you don't have to write out that much. Try and condense your questions next time. Anyway, to answer your question. Probably not, since there is an expense that would go into making a fully realistic Thomas and the Magic Railroad film that would exceed any budget. I mean, it would use a lot to repaint all necessary engines to look like their Thomas counterparts. You have Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, James, Percy, Toby, Dieselton, Splatter, and Dodge. I'd have to find all suitable engines to play their roles. An E2, a T9, a Black 5, Flying Scotsman, a 27, Trojan, a J70, a 42, and two 08s. There's also modifications. The 27 class would need to have an extended running board and an Addy pony truck for James. Trojan would need the back cab and bunker for Percy, and the 42 would need a claw for Diesel 10. Also, a fully functional engine for Lady would have to be built. Also, there's the viaduct scene. If the collapsing trestle in the General was the most expensive scene in silent film history, then I can bet your booster bootstraps that the viaduct scene would be the most expensive scene in the history of 21st century films. There's also the fact that I'd have to find all the green screen footage of the actors, and something tells me that that would be harder to find the director's cut. No, I'm happy enough with using models, thank you very much. Just that they need more realistic sounds, which I'm applying to them over time. The only major change I would like to make is the location for the route of the IVR. Now, Brit Allcroft chose the 475 engine to play the Rainbow Sun, as she was inspired by O. Winston Link's photographs of the Abington branch, and the 475 was the only operating engine of the class of engine that ran on the Abington branch. I can understand her intentions there, because O. Winston Link is a famous man in the world of railroading, and his photographs are outstanding. It is really respectful to him if you are inspired to use something that ties in with his works, and for other people for that matter. But what I don't like about her decision in that is that it resulted in most of the Indian Valley Railroad shots having to be filmed on the Strasburg Railway. There's not a blinking hill in sight, let alone any mountains. If the railway is called the Indian Valley Railroad, then you should show evidence that it runs through a valley. Shining Time is situated within the Indian Valley. Show a mountain or two. Personally, I would have asked to ship the 475 down to the Great Smoky Mountains Railway. They've got good mountains in the area to use for shots of trains running through a valley, and the railway line's practically a good recreation of the Abington branch in O. Winston Link's photographs. The 475 would have fit right in perfectly. And hey, at least the GSMR still had some rainbow-colored coaches at the turn of the century. It gives more of a reason to actually call the train the Rainbow Sun. Next question. At 21:01 in the last Q&A video, the second one I'm talking about, ticking us Thomas fans off for the strict idea of not writing any more Railway Series books. Huh? How would you feel if someone that's not related to the Reverend Audrey, like Hilary Fortman, R.I.P., who's twice as worse as a nostalgia critic, by the name of Mary Helen Craig, blames Thomas for the lack of female train drivers in the world, when it's none of her business, when she knows nothing about Thomas and the Audrey books? Okay, I can understand getting upset at what Mary Craig said, because she doesn't know any better to give a realistic point. Trust me, I'm ticked off myself over the garbage she throws out at us. But what I don't understand is why you compare that with my defense of the Railway Series and make it seem like my defending the books is not important. It's certainly important to talk about. Sure, the comments by Mary Craig is something that every fan is angry about, but it's not the only thing that fans are irritated at. What I meant by ticking us Thomas fans off is the fact that the policy of hits stated in the video in question means that the seeds of Thomas and Friends are being shunted into the sidings, Christopher's stories especially. Because he's the current author of the Railway Series, he's the one who's receiving a majority of the abuse that this policy throws at him. The Reverend stories have complete collections and box sets, but Christopher Audrey's stories I feel are being rejected for no apparent reason. Have you ever seen any of his books in box sets? Or any more publications of the new collection with Thomas and his friends added? Or even a massive book containing every story that the Reverend Audrey and Christopher Audrey wrote? You have to admit, the fact that Christopher Audrey recently decided not to write any more books in the Railway Series, largely because of the fact that the publishers are delusioned by the fact that Thomas is nothing more than a marketing brand for preschoolers, and that the Railway Series wouldn't be very appealing to the fans out there. They've even refused to republish the Island of Sodor book by Reverend Audrey, despite the fact that so many requests have been sent out to them. You have to remember that it's the Railway Series that introduced the world to Thomas the Tank Engine in the first place, and that Thomas and Friends were stemmed from these books. From that, the Railway Series deserves every bit of respect as much as Thomas and Friends does. That means every piece of material written by the Audreys, both father and son. So far, I haven't seen much respect given to Christopher Orr's books. As a kid who grew up reading the Railway series, I've grown to love them, and I want my children to read them when I have a family of my own. But that's not going to happen if the Railway series are just going to fade into the background. We can't push aside the origins of a world-famous engine for no apparent reason. Otherwise, people will start thinking that Thomas was just created for marketing productivity. It's not a marketing scheme. It started out as a small set of stories told within a small family. To the persuasion of Margaret Audrey, Reverend Audrey sent his stories to a publisher. What resulted in that was a successful series parents could read to their children at bedtime, and a chance for Reverend Audrey to create and write the historical accounts for a mythological world as extensive as J.R.R. Tolkien's accounts of Middle-earth. The Railway series is not a marketing scheme. It's a magical world that has its own history and ties in closest with the mythologies and history of the United Kingdom. I think that I can assure you that any one of the Audreys living today, and Brit Allcroft herself, would say just the same. Now, on the subject of Mary Craig, no one asked me before to talk about the subject. I know it's an important subject to talk about, but no one asked me to give my views about it before, and certainly there was no other question which had a relation to the issue in which I could cleanly transition to in order to speak about it. What she gives out is false and inappropriate accusations based on a survey consisting of a limited group, that being her co-workers, who might as well know nothing else about Thomas either. All that I spoke about concerning the Railway series is the defense for them, and it's all based on evidence from a wider audience. There's proof in the Thomas and Friends wiki site, the Sodor fan site, even the World of Sodor, a website created by the Audreys, has been discontinued. So, comparing the importance of controverting falsified rantings of a disillusioned woman who knows little to nothing about the true essence of railroading with the importance of my defense for a disappearing era is rather unfair and, to put it bluntly, inappropriate. I apologize if I sound offensive to your statement, but the way you put your question was rather hurtful. It was like saying that my defense for the Railway series was inappropriate. Now, had you asked in a nicer manner, like, could you please share your thoughts on the Mary Craig debate, I would be more than glad to give my opinion on the whole subject. But to say, why talk about this thing when there's something else more important to talk about, is not called for. Consider yourself lucky that I didn't ignore this question and moved on. However, I do have a message for Mary Craig, and you can pass it on to her. She probably hasn't looked outside her group of employees to see if there are any other female train workers. Thusly, she doesn't give a sense of the true influence of railroading. Most of the influence of taking up railroading comes from the ancestry of the engine crews of today. Their fathers or grandfathers were crews of old railways themselves, and if they want to follow in their footsteps, that's all right by me. If I interview women I don't know and ask if they want to be train drivers but say they wouldn't want to because they have other intentions, I can understand that. If they don't want to be an engine driver, that's all right by me. There's several other women around the globe who I don't know, and any one of them can be an engine driver. I've seen a good amount of female engine drivers in the media, many of them in the UK. However, if I ask women and their answer is they don't want to be because they think trains are only for men, that I can understand getting upset at. I would at once give a point as to why trains aren't only for men. No one ever said that only men can drive a locomotive. I do agree with everyone else that blaming Thomas and Friends on the lack of female crews is ridiculous. Thomas and Friends is not an advertisement for train travel, and it shouldn't be treated as such. What should be noted is that while railroading is fun, it's also very dangerous. People have to work very hard and risk their lives to make sure that passengers and freight have a safe journey. Drivers have to watch the tracks to make sure that nothing is on the line, and something as small as a soda can or a crack in the track can be life-threatening, as the men can't see them well and won't know what hit them if they come off the tracks. Conductors also have to make sure that there are no saboteurs or people with no passes are on the train, as they can lead to the threat of death towards other passengers. Rolling stock is also very heavy. Even in the train yard, men have to be careful, as it's very difficult to stop a coach or a truck from rolling by themselves. Even without a full load, these cars can still run you over. Railroaders have to use courage, quick reflexes, and a sharp focus whenever they have to work on or near a railway car. People have families, and if both a mother and father worked on a railroad and both of them are killed by a derailment or collision or by getting run over, their children would be all alone and put into an orphanage. Someone has to stay with their children and take care of them. And usually, mothers are the best people for that. Now, Mary Craig, put that into your noggin and consider that! Okay. Next question. I know this makes no sense, but the YouTube and 10% of the Thomas fans and myself can explain this more. Since you're addicted to the whole Twilight Road concept of yours, but if you think that Mara Wilson getting possessed by a demon is scary, how would you feel if an untold story of the ghost train crossing the viaduct was named Timothy, not Tale of the Brave Timothy, but Ghost Train Timothy, that committed suicide, killing several people, and finding out he broke out into a demon was scary? Okay, addicted is putting it rather boisterously. The intention of the Twilight Railroad Adventures was merely to have a theme to celebrate Halloween. Nothing more. It's only been in one video in which I made with the theme of that series. I even said I didn't have intentions to develop the series. I only have intentions of working on the Magic Road Adventures. So you can't really say I'm addicted to it. Now, to get to your question, have you ever seen The Exorcist or read the book by William Peter Blatty? I haven't, but I've seen enough evidence that tells me that it is really scary. The fact that Mara Wilson is portrayed in the Channel Awesome shows, not that they are really awesome, as being possessed is scary because demonic possession involves dealing with true evil, demons, or even the devil himself. How would you like it if you came across a person with pale complexion, yellow eyes, scarred face, scraggly hair, and sharp teeth, who vomits up green bile, curses at you, and calls himself the devil? Yeah, that would be unpleasant. Mara Wilson is one of my favorite actresses, so seeing her with demonic eyes and talking in dual voices is a sort of trigger that brings up images of The Exorcist, and just makes me hate the story even more. What's worse, the pictures used from that film are constantly being used as jump scares in web games and videos. I just really hate it! If you want to see an example to get more of a sense of what I'm trying to explain, check out Gaijin Goomba's video, What Makes a Good Horror Game. As for the untold story of Timothy, I only found out about this story recently. Very recently! I had no idea about the story until Nicholas Montagnino asked his question about the subject on this video. I'll admit that it's very dark and very scary. I did claim earlier in this video that I don't like creepypastas because they are too dark for my liking, but because it is a creepypasta, and the plot of the story is meant to be a deleted prologue of the Ghost Train, I find it less appealing for the lack of realistic continuity to the production team and true evidence that this deleted scene would actually exist. The inspiration that stemmed this creepypasta only originated from a gag that was used at the time of Thomas and the Magic Railroad, that being a ridiculously made Thomas face. Quite honestly, I would be more affected if it wasn't tied in with the production company of Thomas the Tank Engine. One version of the story, adapted by 22 Tesla, is the closest example I can think of in which I might be more affected by the story, but because the whole thing still uses Thomas the Tank Engine in his storyline, it feels out of place. In my opinion, it would be more affecting if it wasn't told as a Thomas story at all. Again, the fact that it's supposed to be in continuity of the story Ghost Train isn't appealing because it lacks with appropriate tie-ins. Percy says ghost trains are a warning to others. Timothy kills himself and his passengers intentionally, so there's no point of his ghost returning to act as a warning. Also, the psychological horror in this story isn't very terrifying in my opinion. I didn't talk about this earlier, but I will now because you've provoked me to. I'm going to compare The Exorcist with The Untold Story. Yes, as much as I hate the film, I'll have to deal with it. What The Exorcist has in its storyline is that a priest uncovers relics that were made to worship a demon of the Middle East or Africa, whatever it is. Around the same time, a little girl discovers an Ouija board game which channels the awakened demon into her body, resulting in her fighting to remain in her body while the demon grows stronger by the day. All this takes place around Halloween, and if you've watched Diesel's D199's Trick or Treat, you can get a sense as to why this is dangerous. The film creates a true sense of fear that strikes into the heart of the audience because the reaction of the characters surrounding the girl is very natural. They have no idea of what's happening. There are hints that demonic possessions have happened a long time before the setting of the film, but the demon chooses to bide his time and strike again when people least suspect it. Because of the time he chooses, in which people believe that most personality disorders are caused by paranoia and schizophrenia, it all happens unexpectedly. People panic and almost have no idea of what to do, and fear that there is absolutely no hope. The story also ties in with Christianity. The demon desecrates the religion by abusing the holy structures in a church, curses reprehensibly using Jesus' name, uses a crucifix for unspeakable activities, and does it all using the body of a young innocent girl. That's psychological terror for you. What's more, the original story itself was based on a true exorcism event. That makes the story even scarier, because as soon as you realize that the story was based on a true event, a fear awakens inside you that there is a possible chance that even you might have the risk of being possessed if you play with items that involve channeling spirits. But the most important element in the telling of the story is that the terror takes its time to show itself. You have to let the audience get to know the character beforehand, show what they're like in an everyday situation, and gradually let the horror build up slowly with its pacing, and when the moment is right, scare the scrap out of the audience. It's the same with the Nostalgia Critics review of A Simple Wish. The scene with Mara Wilson doesn't scare you dead on. It builds up as Mara taunts the Nostalgia Critic, and as it gets to the climax, BAM! You get your horror mode pent up. I was not expecting Mara to go yellow-eyed, red-tinted, and dual-voiced. Because of this, I was speechless when the scene was over. Now for the untold story. The overall plot of the story, Timothy getting out of his crew's control and plunging himself off a bridge, taking his crew and his passengers with him, is really dark and would be horrific. However, like I said before, it has plot holes. Why is it that Timothy gets possessed? Who possessed him? How did he get possessed? What was Timothy like beforehand? Was Timothy a demon trained this whole time? Did he allow himself to become a demon at the end? There's very little to build up in the story preceding the events to explain fully why the events happened in the first place. It just jumps straight to the night of ultimate terror with only a brief section of narration telling us what's going on, and it's not fully explained well. Because it jumps straight to the extremities, it's not as scary and just comes out as silly child play. The aftermath doesn't give much of an impression either. We don't see the villagers reaction to the event. We don't see Timothy return to crash another train and kill other people. Is there an exorcist in the town to rid the railway of this demonic threat? If the author of this creepypasta wanted to create a true effect of horrific affection, he needs to learn to slow down in his pacing. Wait before you scare your audience. Tell us more about what is going on, who the characters are, what provokes this terrifying act. Anything. Just don't jump straight to the scares. Also, come up with a better aftermath, because the one that is given is put in a rather dissatisfying way. And don't write it up as a continuity to Thomas the Tank Engine in any way. Whether it be tying with a story or behind the scenes event, just don't. It's insulting to the franchise, to Reverend Audrey, to Brit Allcroft, and David Minton. Just don't. Jiminy, my voice is getting hoarse. Well, anyway, that's all the questions that I have right now. And, I know that I said that this would be the last questions and answers video that I would be posting for a long time. But, if any of you have any questions that you desperately need to ask me, but you probably won't remember it by the time I post up the next questions and answers video, feel free to post them in the comments section below, and I'll archive it for a future time. But for now, I have other projects that I need to work on, and my voice is getting very hoarse, so, I can't talk anymore. That's all for now. Cheerio!